I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing not too bad. I'm doing not too bad. Thank you very much. So, if you're just joining us, this is Paula and Susan, and we are answering some questions that we have received. Paula, why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about today?
This one's an interesting one. And for anybody who's run a business for a while, or even just led a team for a while, this one might feel a little bit familiar. I know it certainly did for me when I read it. So, dear Susan and Paula, I'm the CEO of a company that just went through a team breakup. My key team member quit during a tense call after we agreed on a client decision. And a week later, he said he hadn't actually quit. You can imagine what that played out like. So once he finally left, key man risk, though, took on a whole new meaning. The business discovered that what we thought were systems were really habits and shortcuts that lived in places they shouldn't have. Project data, client notes, and even internal decisions were scattered across personal texts, private emails, chat GPT conversations. None of it was stored in our database or accessible to our team. This has made me realize how vulnerable a company becomes when its key information and knowledge isn't in a system, but in somebody's digital personal, sorry, right, in someone's personal digital pockets. In an age where AI tools, messaging apps, and cloud drives blur the lines between personal and professional, how do we safeguard what truly belongs to the business? How do leaders protect their companies from people who are the system and make sure critical knowledge actually transfers before it disappears? Signed, the CEO cleaning up the digital debris. I love that digital debris. It's
Oh,
just, ugh, I know my stomach was just, as I was reading that, and because I've been through, like I've experienced it when somebody leaves, and what you realize after they left is that a lot of what they were doing wasn't following what they were supposed to in terms of process. And there were a lot of shortcuts. And the work got done and it seemed to done well. And as long as that person's in that role, life's good. But the minute they leave, everybody else has to pick it up and clean it up and catch it up.
it's very
Yeah.
tough. I was so scared when I read this particular message because it's true. People don't realize where their information is going. In this
Yeah.
world where you can take quick screen grabs or recordings or data and just download it, where does the information go and how do you protect the business, right? Let's talk about it in terms of leadership, ownership, um, data in the age of AI and automations. The person becomes the process. And I know I've talked about it with several of my clients, actually, and I know you have as well, because we were talking just before
Yeah.
hitting record, that there are people on our teams who are a little older and they've been around for a while and they're about to retire. And how do you take the information from their head and make sure that it's codified in the back end so that all of those things that get done and they're amazing and they're amazing, now it becomes an actual process that everybody else on the team can follow, because right now it's in their head and you didn't even realize it was in their head. Right?
Well, I think
Everyone relies on them.
crazy thing, as I was reading the letter, it brought me back to the conversation that we had with John from Evermore, right? Do
Hmm.
you remember we were talking about the wisdom economy? And
Yes.
this right here, this is the wisdom economy. This is it. It's that intangible knowledge that our best people have stored in their heads that it's not easy to put into a database. And so when someone leaves, that intellectual property walks out the door of your business. And I think too often business owners underestimate the value of that intellectual property. And so we don't make an attempt to capture it while we can. And then what happens is, and I've seen this play out in companies as well is there's a decision made that maybe somebody um, isn't really the right fit any longer for the organization. And then everybody moves into protection mode because there's this person's no longer the right fit. I'm going to need to part ways with them. First, I have to protect the business, which is a massive red flag for any worker when your employer comes to you and says, "Hey, can you document how you do your job?" Because it's not part of the culture, right? So there's so many layers to the conversation, especially in this world of AI, especially in this world of AI, because today somebody might be taking a shortcut by going to chat gpt and saying, I need to do this thing, tell me how, and the AI is actually doing the thinking. And if you're not there as it's doing the thing, you don't see what the process is that that thinking went through or where the challenges are. You just see the outcome. But the individual who's documenting the work may not actually be able to document it either, which is the risk with AI um, when you allow it to be implemented in your organization without a policy, right?
Well, and even with a policy,
People need to
it's
follow
hard
it.
to police it. And I don't use that term lightly, but I'm thinking back in my head, in 2003 when I worked for the pharma company, they gave me a laptop, they gave me a cell phone, they gave me whatever I needed to do my job, but I left it at the office. I didn't necessarily take it home unless I absolutely needed to,
Right.
but then the information was still on those pieces of tech. And now, with remote and hybrid, a lot of us are using our personal devices for work related purposes. And so the
Yeah.
information, whether we want it or not, as a business owner, flows through somebody else's personal information. So back to the comment about having a process in place,
Yeah.
how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you verify that that happens when somebody leaves, whether they leave under good circumstances or bad circumstances? How do you know that there's not a bunch of information that walks out the door with them?
Yeah. And I think
Mm.
there's, well, one, I don't think there's a good answer. There is no perfect answer to that question because as human beings, we're terrible at creating documentation for things we do well. We suck at it. We absolutely suck at it. Not very optimistic today, am I?
But it brings up a good point, right? When we talk about documentation, reports, SOPs,
Yeah.
whether you're doing, I mean, for me, I love Looms, but there's
Yeah.
other places like Tangos and Wikis and all of these other pieces that will record all of the steps that you're doing. So if I'm then having to be the person that follows up while the bookkeeper is away, I can watch the screen grab and I can probably catch
Yeah.
where they didn't say that and that is what they did, but I can probably see their cursor or something on their screen.
1,000,000%. If you're talking about processes that happen on a computer, actually just taking a screen capture of yourself doing the thing is, in fact, when we're working with clients on AI process mapping, where we're looking at how do we automate this process, one of the critical components of that is to actually get on a screen share and record that and have the person go through the task and tell you what they're doing as they do the task so that you have the visual of it, because then you can see where the button is, what it actually says, just all those little details, which from a process perspective are huge. But to be honest, I think those are the easy ones. Like really, those technology processes are generally the easy ones because most of us didn't build our own tech. We're buying the tech. So there's a tech support team that can kind of walk you through a process if you've never done it before, if you can't find good documentation. Um, there's ways of getting help. There's help built into the software. Where I find data gets really messed up is when people aren't paying attention to data cleanliness
Ooh.
or data completeness. And the same with, a place for everything. My grade 3 teacher, a place for everything and everything in its place, right?
Yeah.
When my son's a chef, wonderful cook, but when he cooks in my kitchen, he grabs what he needs and then he goes and eats the food.
Oh.
Right. And so everything's out. And if he does that twice during the day and then I come home, like it's now an hour of cleaning just to get to a place where I can start making dinner. Whereas if you just use it, put it away, use it, put it away, use it, put it away. And I think the same thing happens to us in business. It's human nature. There's no judgment here. It's human nature. But it happens in business where, oh gosh, you know what? I'll get those business cards into the CRM later. I'll submit the receipts later.
Mhm.
AI has been a godsend for me in terms of keeping expenses up because all I have to do is go and it's done. It's also saved my marriage because I co-own my business with my husband and I'll ask him for receipts and he'll be like, yeah, I got them. I got them. And then he'll say, oh, I found these in my car. And it's all these gas receipts from the last 5 months that he's been telling me he gave me. And I would have to like copy and transcribe those because he's creative, not detail oriented. Um, so, taking pictures, but these things, right? These are things that we don't do or that people don't do. Those are the places that are really hard to recover because it actually doesn't exist in the CRM. So, how do you find it again? And that's where I think it's super important to have checks and balances in your processes where you validate your data. What do you think?
I was thinking back to a couple of things. One, I've got an epidemiology background. And so the first thing we do before we analyze anything from a statistical nature is that we actually look at the data. We look at the
Mm-hmm.
data. We have to clean the data, right? Are there outliers? Why is it an outlier? What would it look like? Identifying those pieces so that when we actually do the statistical analysis, that we either know why we included or didn't include something that didn't make sense originally. But just that familiarity with what you're doing is really important. And
Mm-hmm.
it's no different when we talk about data in our businesses, really. I mean, one of the projects I undertook a little while ago was to amalgamate, just to your point, I was amalgamating my lists of people and contacts and everything. And I was, I have this list over here and that list over there. Like, this is from the conferences that I held or the events. And this is from those who have purchased from me. Or by the time I was done, I had 84,000 rows of data, but I knew that there were duplicates in there. And so then how do you go through and clean the data and then
Mm-hmm.
enrich the data? And I'm talking about that from a CRM perspective because on this selection of spreadsheets I had LinkedIn URLs or whatever. And on this one, I had locations, but I need those to kind of merge. So I only really have one row and it's a complete row on that one individual as opposed to these
Mm-hmm.
multiple pieces so that I can do something with the data. Well, I'm not going to sit there manually and do it. I mean, at the end of the day, I worked at it from an N8N perspective, which I love N8N. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also use Google Apps Script. And so being able to be creative and work with these in order to get the output that I wanted. And so we wound up with just over 54,000 rows of data in the end that was usable data. That's important. And so working with it and looking at it and thinking about it from a key man risk perspective, those individuals who have a need to record, you whether it's, hi, I'm just going to record why I'm doing this because I just need to do it, and then I'll send off the recording so it can be transcribed and uploaded into a wiki. Now, for those who don't know what a wiki is essentially your Encyclopedia Britannica for your business. So,
Yeah.
um, everything you ever wanted to know about whatever is in that database, and that's where then AI can come in, and you can have all of these tools that are able to be easily access the Google
Oh,
Drive
yeah.
if you're using Google, or the Wiki if you're using Wiki, or whatever, wherever you're housing your data. And so when you're talking about this poor CEO who was trying to clean up all that digital debris, you need to look at key man risk. And life happens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to be talking about employees in terms of scaring them and saying, hey, if somebody says to you this, Uh, we literally just had a client recently have a stage 4 brain tumor. That's not expected. It's not
No,
something like it, but thankfully they had already been documenting their process and documenting these pieces, because then they had to step off and do other things. That's important for every business. And then,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, I joke about it's a flag, but the real problem isn't that you're asking them for documentation. The real problem is that you're not asking them for documentation until you perceive an imminent risk.
well,
And
that's
and I
it.
think when you make it part of your culture, right? You make it part of your culture. If you can make the tasks that you do something you can easily train someone else to do, as an employee, you become promotable,
Yes.
right? You become promotable because you can now train someone to do this work, which frees you up to do maybe another level of work in advance because no one's afraid that they're going to lose, you in that particular role. And from a leadership perspective, I think the way we present the request is also very important and is also very key. When I had my agency, we went through a whole process of creating an employee manual, and we had everybody do it together. So everybody was given a task of documenting their day for like a 2-week period. And then we went through and then we swapped manuals, and somebody else tried to do their job for a day. And we figured out where the gaps were. And we ended up with, I mean, it wasn't a thick, this is in the days of binders, right? We didn't have AI back then, or it would have been an AI tool, but it was a binder. And each department had its tabs. But you could go into a department and you could say, okay, how do you do this? If somebody was sick, and this was somebody calls and say, I really feel like garbage today, and you've got a critical campaign going out, all you need to know is, okay, what do I need to cover? And where is it in the binder? And then anybody on the team could go in and do those urgent critical tasks to keep something moving forward. And we didn't need to worry about, that this was going to fall crazy far behind. I mean, there were some things that had technical skill. It's an agency, right? And so sometimes, yeah, you'd need to bring somebody in and bring a temp in if they're going to be gone for 2 or 3 days. But things that have to be done like right now, this moment, are typically the last or the first admin task. But it's cultural. For me, I think it's a cultural piece. Um,
Can we talk about that subject matter expert for just a minute?
sure.
Because that's a really critical one. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in the business that can be more mundane, or we're moving things or whatever, and there's still critical functions in the business. But somebody who comes in and they have a skill set, they're a subject matter expert. It's really still critically important to have that wiki created, report created, documentation of what they're doing. And so, as much as they might be, in the business, maybe for a project only, take that opportunity to learn as much as possible. And so, getting them to record what they're doing and sharing it, even if they're working remotely, whatever that is,
Right.
that's important.
Subject matter expertise is massively important. And where one of the biggest risks that an organization has is with its account management or client management teams.
Yeah.
Because client management people, they get to know things about clients that are beyond the work, but that help the work go faster, smoother, and easier.
Correct.
You know, I went into a Whole Foods this week with my daughter. We had out running some errands, and I needed to go. We ran into Whole Foods, and I don't normally go to Whole Foods, but we ran in because it happened to be closed. And the woman at the cash desk, Susan, knew every customer. We're talking a Whole Foods in the middle of the city. Knew every customer. So while we're standing in line, all I heard was, "Oh, today, how are the girls? You just on your way back from soccer?"
Wow.
Followed up by, "You haven't been in a while. Have things been okay? How's your mom?" Like it was just this constant knowledge that this woman has of people who buy groceries. But people were actually trying to get into her line because they wanted to say hello, you know? And
Yep.
she was calling to people 2 lines over. hello, how are you doing? Then she would turn around. When we got up there, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry. She goes, I'm just a chatterbox. Then she proceeds to tell us, oh, yeah, he's in with this kid. It's crazy. It's like, how do you know all this much about? I mean, how many thousands of people go through a store every day? That
Mhm.
is the kind of institutional knowledge that when that person leaves, it goes with her. In a business, especially a B2B company, when you can keep that knowledge just by documenting it.
And I think there's so much that we could dive into there. Uh,
Oh, we could be here for hours. I think we're probably getting close to time, though.
we probably are.
Yeah.
I think the last thing that I wanted to touch on was just something that came up in conversation uh, about the tool of AI.
Hmm.
And really, I was reading something, and it was kind of funny because somebody had asked the question, how much does it cost these LLMs, these models, when you say please and thank you? And so I wrote down a couple stats
Okay.
because it was funny to me. There was an interview with Sam Altman, who runs Open AI, that's
Yep.
ChatGPT, and he said it costs thousands, tens of millions of dollars in electricity per year because people say please and thank you. But what I thought was interesting was the next paragraph down, who said, out of those people who were being polite, 12% did it for fear of the future. I'm like, where did we watch Terminator and that's why? So this
Yeah.
is Skynet. But 2/3 of those who were being impolite, not saying please and thank you, were doing so for brevity's purpose. It wasn't that
Yeah.
they themselves were impolite. I just thought it was interesting because we've talked about this. You're using AI to take the subject matter expertise, to create the documents, to create the reports, to
Hmm.
create the SOPs. And we don't want it to be human. We don't need it to be human. It is a
Mm-mm.
tool in our toolbox. And you
It
said
is
something
not
just before
human.
this. Yes, you said something just before this that talked about the level of usage of AI last year compared to this year. Please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It has declined. So
What?
numbers are showing. Well, companies are adopting AI, right? We're adopting it to try and solve these problems, but AI has issues. We talked about them with John, right? There's error rates, hallucinations,
Bias.
unreliability, coded bias. Absolutely. And this story that we tell the world that AI thinks, AI does not think. AI is a data machine that predicts and parses and regurgitates, but it uses natural language to do so. And so we start to feel like it's a person, and we anthropomorphize it. We turn it into, in our minds, a person. And that's where that feeling of needing to say please and thank you and all these extra flowery words that we put into our language, if we spoke to a human being without those, there'd be words for us, none of them flattering. But with the computer doesn't care if you say please or thank you,
Correct.
right? um so I have two opinions on that, because I think we should be managing that. But we also, I think we need to change the way we think about AI and make it AI in the loop, not human in the loop, not AGI where we don't need humans. Those things are both demeaning to human intelligence. They are both. When someone tells you, oh, yeah, this is going to be a human in the loop process, the human is being treated as the tool that comes in to support the AI. And when you talk about complete AGI, what you're saying is human beings aren't smart enough to compete with these machines. Well, who made these machines? Who created these machines? Who coded the logic that runs these machines? How much trust do you have in that individual that you've never met, that you don't know, that's completely faceless? You have no idea what their moral views are, their ethical views. You don't know what their education was. You haven't seen their transcripts from university, but they've coded this logic and made decisions about how decisions will be made. And you're going to trust that they are smarter than every other human on the planet and abdicate. These things don't work. So I think if we just switch it to talk about AI in the loop, where does AI fit into the loop of this work that a human being needs to execute? How do we fit it in? And take away this anthropomorphization if we can. And it's hard. I struggle. Um, it'll be a lot easier for us because AI can do some amazing things, like get rid of writing those awful reports that so many, I mean, you still have to write them, you still have to know they're accurate. But, if you could take a 2-hour job down to 25 minutes, would you?
Hmm. I think for me, I came to the understanding earlier this year after playing around a lot more with AI agents and tools, that there's a lot of times that AI is not the right word to use in a sentence. And it can
Mm-hmm.
often be automations, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot about, if it's an AI agent, it has to include an LLM access point because you're trying to do something specific for that. But there's a lot of people out there who make use of AI when it's really not AI. It's actually an automation to move the data to take this point and move it over there and change or modify the data in some specific way. And we have broad strokes just started to call it AI.
Well, we've collapsed the definition of AI into LLMs, right?
True.
AI technically has been around for decades.
Yeah.
And it includes automations, it includes machine learning, because what it really is algorithmic intelligence. And I'm not saying that's what it's technically called, but that's what it actually is. It's an algorithm that makes decision based on rules that have been hard coded into it. And it might, LLMs might make it able to kind of reconstruct some of those rules. But I find that kind of amusing because you wouldn't have an employee come into your company and say, here's how we're going to do it. You have to follow this process. But if you don't feel like it and you think you know better, have at her. But we
Yes.
do that with a computer. So it's algorithmic. And it's all of these things. LLMs are just a tiny little component and by themselves are actually not that useful. You
Goes to
have to integrate them into something else.
it goes to garbage in, garbage out, right? That's something
Mm-hmm.
that, 30 years ago, 40 years ago when I was coming through school. Now I'm dating myself. um,
In the abacus room.
yes, totally. And we were talking about, if you feed it with crap data, you're not going to get the great information out of it. It's not going to serve the purpose you really wanted it to serve in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot that happens with the LLMs. I mean, we don't have time to go into that today, but at the
No.
end of the day, I think that we think more of it than it probably is. Again, it's back to what we talked about earlier. It's a tool. And so we just
Mm-hmm.
have to know how to use the tool to get the output we want in order to make what we're doing in business safe, secure, efficient, maybe even fun. There's lots of ways to use it for different outcomes,
I
positive
think of it
outcomes.
absolutely. I think of it kind of like the alternator in your engine.
Hmm.
It
Okay.
it serves a function in making the engine go, but there aren't too many people who drive a car who have an advanced degree in alternator maintenance and repair, right? And I think we will get to a point, we are getting to a point where AI becomes not a thing on its own. It becomes an aspect of something we do. And you're starting to see it now even with CRMs that have built-in AI, agentic AI. And really what that is just a simpler form of automation to do something, you know. You're seeing other tools. Your QuickBooks has AI built in. That's how it recognizes your receipts when you click a picture and hit submit. And I think we'll start to see companies solving friction that their customers experience by leveraging AI's capabilities to solve those problems, um, in a way that still leaves their customer in control of the output and with ownership of the output.
Very much.
Yeah.
All right, we are definitely at time now. I know
Yeah.
it goes by so quickly. So, guys, thank you so much for sticking around. Really appreciate that. Don't forget to reach out. We love hearing from you very much, and we'll